Hey, Connor Nigenfind here. I'm glad you are tuning in to this sermon or service. I hope it blesses you and encourages you in your walk with Jesus. If it does, you might want to share this resource with others, and you might want to find more resources on our website at edgewateralliance.org. There you can also partner with us financially and help support the advancement of the kingdom through Edgewater Alliance Church. But I hope this sermon or service blesses you. Thanks for tuning in.
About 2,000 years ago, Jesus came to earth and died for the sins of all mankind. It was the single most important event in the history of the world. But Jesus didn't just come to die for people. He came to live as a human first, and that may actually be just as important. What if the 30 years of life before mattered a lot? Well, the incarnational way of life, it's offered to everybody, but very few will take it. It doesn't come easy. It doesn't come without a choice. It doesn't come without faith. It doesn't come without a leap. What if actually following Jesus means that when you walk out the door of your house every morning, you actually get to see what God's doing and participate? You literally get to be good news. I would definitely sign up for that.
Well, good morning, church family. How are we doing today? Good. It's good to be with you. So I've been looking forward to the month of September and what is going to be happening for our church family during this month. We are actually going to be taking a strategic break from our series in the book of Acts, and we are going to be transitioning to a mini series that will just last 1 month, and this series is entitled Flesh. And I want to tell you why we are doing this. And there's going to be stuff that becomes clear towards the end of the month. We're really building towards something. We're moving towards something as a church that I am truly enthusiastic about. Some of that, it will be kind of an element of surprise. It'll be coming later for you. But why we are doing this series really has to do with a great foundation that has been laid for us that we want to build off of now. And here's the foundation. Maybe you're new to EAC and you already picked up on some of this language, but for those of you who have been here for a while, we have heard things like we are to go be the church. We're to be representatives of Jesus where we live, work, and play. We want every man, woman, and child to have repeated opportunities to see, hear, and respond to the gospel. And by God's grace, this framework has been laid for us as a church. And now, I think is a really good time in this season as a community of faith to say, what does that look like practically and functionally? What does it actually mean to represent Jesus well, where we live, work, and play? And so this series is going to be very practical with that aim, and another aim that we'll kind of share with you later on in our time together. And so if you're here and you're like, I am in, like I want to follow Jesus well, I want to go and be on mission with him. I just kind of want to know more specifically, what does that look like? How do I live my life in a missional way? This is the series for you. And Hugh Halter wrote a book called Flesh. This series is entitled Flesh. It's not the Bible, all right? But what we're doing is we're going to be looking at biblical themes, and we're going to be relying very heavily on some stuff that I have looked at closely. Your staff has read. Your elders have actually met with Hugh Halter. And so I just want to give credit where credit is Hugh and let you all know that he deserves a lot of credit for what is being said from the platform. I'm going to say that on the onset of this series. I'm not going to say it every single point, but he's been a significant influence on my way of thinking as it relates to what does it mean, really, to be a missionary in 2021 where you live, where you work, where you play. Maybe you're here and you're not sure this is a conversation even worth having. You're like, well, do we really need to kind of have this mindset? And so I want to share on the onset of our time together some data with you that for those of you who've been here, it might reinforce what you believe. And for those of you who are new, it might kind of catch you up to speed. Pew Research in 2019, less than 2 years ago, released an article with this title: "In the U.S., decline of Christianity continues at rapid pace." The article begins with these words: "The religious landscape of the United States continues to change at a rapid clip." The article notes that the percentage of American adults who describe themselves as Christian is down more than 12 percentage points over the past decade. So that would be more than 1% a year. It says, and I'm quoting the article, "The trends are clear. The U.S. is steadily becoming less Christian and less religiously observant. Furthermore, the data shows a wide gap between older Americans," in parentheses it writes baby boomers, "and members of the silent generation." If you're hearing you're a baby boomer, Connor's not calling you old. That's the article, all right? "And millennials in their levels of religious affiliation and attendance. More than 8 in 10 members of the silent generation, those born between 1928 and 1945, describe themselves as Christians." That's 84%. That's good. As do 3/4 of baby boomers. 76% is relatively good, right? In stark contrast, only half of millennials, actually a little bit less than half, 49%, describe themselves as Christians. 4 in 10 are religious nuns. This isn't the Catholic people who are very religious. These are people who identify really as nothing. And 1 in 10 millennials identify with non-Christian faith. And so what I want you to be aware of is that while there is a general current in our country moving away from Christianity, the current is the strongest as it relates to those who are younger among us, which says something very significant about the religious landscape of the future. For those of you who are more visual, here's a chart. And what you will notice is a decline in the red. Those are those who would identify as Christians. And with each generation, it is getting significantly smaller. So that by the time you get to my generation, the millennial generation, less than half of us in the United States identify as Christian. Less than half. 4 years ago, Barna Research said this in an article, and this is 4 years old. It has only grown in its relevance since that time. "It may come as no surprise that the influence of Christianity in the United States is waning. Rates of church attendance, religious affiliation, belief in God, prayer, and Bible reading have all been dropping for decades. By consequence, the role of religion in public life has been slowly diminishing, and the church no longer functions with the cultural authority it held in times past." And pay close attention to this last sentence. "These are unique days for the church in America as it learns what it means to flourish in a quote-unquote new post-Christian era." Post-Christian, meaning we once were Christian and we are Christian no longer. Edgewater Alliance Church, let me ask you a question. What do you call a region or a country in which less and less people believe in God? Less and less people go to church. Less and less people read their Bibles and pray. What you should call that is a mission field. A mission field. And mission fields, how do you reach a mission field? It's a little bit of a trick question, but it's quite simple. You send missionaries. And one of the things that I want to lay before you on the onset of this series is if there is any doubt in your minds, I want to awaken you to the reality that America in the year 2021 is in fact a mission field. It may not have been when you were a kid. It may not be depending on where you land demographically as far as your generation, but understand the trajectory of America is heading at a rapid pace to post-Christian as a culture. And so we must then, those of us who know Jesus, who love Jesus, who have experienced his grace and his goodness, must wake up to the reality that no longer can we see America as a Christian nation. We must understand that it is in fact a post-Christian, and increasingly at least becoming a post-Christian nation. In fact, I believe it was Hugh Halter who, when he met with our elders, when he was here with us, he said, "Did you know that China is sending missionaries to America? Did you know that? Like, we are not in the state we once were." And so this series is not about trying to convince you that we live in a mission field. This is just an introduction. If you've been here for the last 10 years, I think you are very aware that we have been aware as a church that this is the case. If you're new, maybe this is new information for you, and it's good information for you to have. But where we are at in this juncture as a local church family is, okay, we believe that where we live, work, and play are mission fields, and we believe that the best way to reach mission fields is with missionaries. This would be a biblical concept. And so the question then becomes, if you're living here and you are living effectively on the mission field, it would make sense that the Lord would want to use you, follower of Jesus, if you know him. If you don't know him and you're exploring questions of faith, I think you're in the right place, and we want to give you freedom to do so. But if you're here and you know Jesus, recognize that you're living on a mission field, and I believe God wants to use you as one of his missionaries. And what we want to do then is not be careless in regards to how we go about the mission. We want to be intentional, biblical, and strategic. If you were to go as a missionary, and missionaries we have a couple right now who's preparing to go overseas, and they've been doing all sorts of preparation to reach an unreached people group, right, rather. And there's like some training that goes into that, and you're gonna like look into, how do I do this effectively? How do I learn the culture? What are ways to be strategic? So when we're talking about missions in the United States, the same rules apply. We don't want to just be willy-nilly out there just kind of doing whatever. We want to understand, okay, how would the Lord have us do ministry as missionaries in an increasingly post-Christian culture in 2021? That is what this series is about. And before we get to any missiologists or the writings of Hugh Halter, like really what we want to start with is Jesus. He is ultimately our model. And so I want to introduce you to the verse that will be kind of our key text for the totality of this series, and that is John 1, verse 14. John 1, verse 14 says this: the Word, and in the context, it's very clear that the Word is Jesus Christ himself. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. I want us to distinguish between the mission of God and the method of God momentarily. Well, Jesus came to seek and save that which is lost. John 10:10, Jesus is speaking himself, and he says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I think you could look at that as a mission statement of Jesus. I've come to bring life. I have come so that they may have life and have it to the full. He came to set the captives free. It's why he came. How he came is a different conversation. He came by taking on flesh. This is the incarnation. And the way I understand the word incarnation, it means to take on flesh. And so Jesus moved into the neighborhood. He got a place in Florida Shores. He moved in. He got a job at Boston Whaler. He worked a blue-collar job. On his lunch break, he would travel to Chick-fil-A and order a 12-piece nugget, right? Like Jesus took on flesh and lived a human life, and he embodied grace and truth. And so if we are to do missions like Jesus did missions, it is not sufficient to launch an informational campaign. It is not enough for us to merely tell people what they should believe. You understand that in a post-Christian culture, this would distinguish between places who have never received the gospel yet, what missiologists would call unreached people groups. When you hear unreached people groups, it's like there's not a gospel witness there. There's not a sufficient gospel witness. They don't understand the gospel. Now, a post-Christian context is also a mission field, but it is a different kind of mission field. It is a mission field in which many people think they understand the gospel, think they understand what the Bible teaches, think they understand what Christianity is. They might be misguided. They might have many misconceptions as to what faith in Jesus is or what it means to be a follower of Jesus, etc. But the understanding of the culture at large is we're familiar with Christianity. We just didn't like it very much, so we have moved on. So understand that if our response to a culture that is becoming increasingly post-Christian is to give them more information about the church that they have rejected, it's probably not going to go over so hot. There are many people, I believe, in America today who have heard the gospel. They have heard what we've had to say. Maybe at times we haven't said it as we should, with the tone we should have said it, etc., but they've heard it. They just haven't seen or experienced it. And there is a drastic difference between hearing the gospel only and seeing and experiencing the gospel. And in the life of Jesus, Jesus embodied grace and truth. And so when people would rub up against the shoulders of Jesus, they not only became increasingly often curious about what he had to say, but they were mesmerized by how he lived his life. They were awestruck by his grace. They were awestruck by his love. They were awestruck by the way he would respect people, perhaps even people in that culture, that even the non-believers of Jesus wouldn't respect or wouldn't show love or grace to. There was something about the life of Jesus, the power of Jesus, the grace of Jesus, partnered with the truth of Jesus, that mesmerized the world. And so if we are to do missions well, the first thing that I want us to look at is the incarnation of Jesus. Jesus took on flesh, moved into the neighborhood. People not only heard what he had to say, they got to experience him. And so what missions is going to look like well to a post-Christian world is there's going to be a sense in which it is going to be highly relational. We're going to be talking next week about street cred, building credibility and what that looks like and why that matters. But for now, I really want you to see yourself not only as somebody who's on mission, but somebody who is to go on mission in the way that Jesus went. And there's something about the incarnation that matters here. This taking on flesh, this moving into the neighborhood, this participating in community of people having access to your life and hopefully seeing Christ in you. We're not going to do this perfectly. Like, Connor is a flawed mess up of a human. Like, when you look at me, you do not see Jesus. But hopefully, by God's grace, in light of my inadequacies and my deficiencies and my sin, people will get glimpses of the love of Jesus in my life. Because Jesus, I believe, lives in my life. And if you're here and you're a follower of Jesus, you've given your life to him, you've asked the Holy Spirit to indwell your life, he lives in you. And people need access to that. They need the love of Jesus to enter into their lives and their workplaces and their coffee shops and their pubs and their sporting events and their YMCAs. They need that. They need Jesus. And so what I want to lay before you this morning is not only the mission that you've been hearing about for years if you've been here, and if you're new, like we're glad you're here. But we want to talk to you about how we go and what it looks like to be on mission. And for our intro today, it's just this idea that you're to live with the intentionality of an incarnational missionary. You might say, Connor, that sounds like a lot of work. Like, I already work a full-time job. I got kids that are crazy. They take up a bunch of my time. I have these family things, and I'm on this committee, and I'm in the HOA, whatever. I don't have time to add anything to my schedule. What I would submit to you is how amazing would it be if instead, maybe the primary thing for you is not adding something new to your schedule, but leveraging your schedule in a way that Jesus would leverage your schedule if Jesus lived your life. If Jesus lived your life and had your job, had your spouse, had your neighbors, how would he live your life? I think he would live it with a high degree of intentionality in the places he is already going. So it might not be adding more things to your schedule. It could be that, but it might be leveraging what is already there. So maybe you're a parent and you have a kid who's in sports. And for 50 plus hours in any given athletic season, you're going to be sitting on the same bleachers with the other parents. What if you saw that as missionary time? Well, maybe you go to the same coffee shop or restaurant every single week and you have the same server and you see some of the same people. Like, what would it look like to bring that level of intentionality? Maybe you see the same neighbors when you're out walking your dog Sparky and they're picking up poop next to you and you're having conversations with people in your neighborhood who also have dogs. Like, what would it look like? For me, I go to the same gym. And one of the most strategic missional moves for me in maybe the last 2 years of my life was so simple. Didn't add a thing to my schedule. You know what I did? I love music. Like, I just love music. And I listen to a lot of music. But I'm like, you know what? When I'm at the gym, I'm going to take my headphones out. And I'm just going to be present. And I'm not like the guy who's like sneaking up on people, cornering them for Jesus kind of thing. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I'm just trying to be relationally present. If people want to talk, that's great. I'm there. And I started building relationships in my gym. And there's a guy, I won't share his name, but we became friends, and he's like super manly dude, and he would talk about eating meat and like protein powder and all this stuff. And for a while, we just talked about that. Like, we just talked about lifting weights and, you know, eating protein and like whatever. And then I remember the machine I was on when he came over, and I think he might have been talking to me about this like touch-up ink he got on his arm. And I asked him, like, well, what's your tattoo about? And it was like super spiritual. It was like, well, this is heaven and this is hell and this cross is me in the middle. And so I'm like, oh, that's cool, man. I'm actually a believer too. And what he said next was kind of funny, and it caught me off guard. He goes, well, I'm not. Like, kind of like a little bit forcefully, like, I'm not a believer. I'm like, oh, okay. He goes, I just have way too many questions. I go, well, I might not be able to answer all those questions, but I've kind of studied this stuff a lot. And if you would like to chat about it sometime, I'd like that, man. That'd be great. He goes, yeah, that'd be good. You want to do that? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. I was like, tonight? He's like, yeah, tonight. So like that night, we met up at Half Wall and for over an hour talked about God. And it was that easy. Like, we talked about meat for a few weeks or whatever. And then I asked him about his tattoo. And next thing I know, for over an hour, we're talking about God and his questions about faith. And he was curious. And that kind of stuff, like, actually happens. But if we want to see more of that happen, we need to be intentional with our lives. Like, people probably will not just send you an email being like, hey, will you tell me about your Jesus? Like, it's probably not going to happen. If it does, it's awesome. Answer that email, but it's unlikely, right? we need to intentionally be present in the lives of other people. And here's a chart from the book Flesh that I want to show you about how transformation can occur. If we can go to the next slide. So what Hugh Halter argues is that it starts with the incarnation. It starts with us seeking to embody grace and truth and being intentionally present in the lives of other people, which then should lead to a good reputation. People be like, man, that's a pretty cool girl. She seems super nice. That's a good dude. I've seen how he loves his family, how he manages his business, how he treats his employees, etc. And then what can happen over time is that conversations happen. Conversations that are not forced, but become naturally, like where people actually want to hear what you have to say. I think sometimes one of the reasons maybe why we've had a bad rap as a movement is that we haven't earned the credibility or had the reputation, and we've just interjected our thoughts into other people's life, and they're like, why are you talking about me? I didn't even ask you, right? And so this is this idea of we're present, we love people, we try to represent Jesus well, we gain a reputation, we have conversations that can then lead to confrontation. Confrontation. If you've ever been confronted about what you believe by someone that you know has your best interest at heart, it is a completely different experience than when you're confronted by somebody you don't know or trust, right? So in the context of healthy friendship and relationship, we can have conversations where people's beliefs are even challenged, and they don't receive that as a threat, but they're like, I think this guy loves me, and he's trying to share this with me for my good. And what can happen then is significant transformation in the lives of other people. But today, it's week 1 of this mini-series. I mean, we're really at the start of this chart. We're talking about incarnation. And so as we close our time together, there's really 2 things that I want to ask of you as we begin this mini-series that will last the month of September. Here's the first one. That you would be incarnationally present with one person who doesn't share your faith in a way that feels authentic to you. That you would be incarnationally present with one person who doesn't share your faith in a way that feels authentic to you. 2 things I want to say about this. The first is be authentic to who you are. So you don't need to do this the way Connor would do this, or the way Ron or Jamie or any of the elders would do this. Like, you do this in a way that feels authentic to you. If you're a golfer, play golf with somebody. If you love barbecue, grab barbecue with somebody. Like, do what feels natural to you, but be intentional. And I would say, like, schedule this today. Like, because if you leave here and you go on with your life might be busy. You might just punt this. So today, prayerfully consider, Jesus, who do I invite to coffee, invite over to my house, play pickleball with, whatever, and you're going to be intentional in that. I would recommend reaching out to one person today and setting that up. The second thing I want to say, which is I think important, and I want you to hear this. I am not asking you to be a salesperson for Jesus. I'm not asking you to be a salesperson for Jesus. I don't have anything against salespeople. My dad was a salesperson. He loves Jesus. There's maybe people in this room who are sales, but there's a caricature that I'm going to leverage to make a point this morning that salespeople are superficially friendly to get you to agree with what they are trying to sell you. Right? They're just going to be nice and kind and buddy, and then if you agree with them, they're still nice and kind, but if you don't, it's like, forget you. It's not what I'm asking you to do. You're not a salesperson for Jesus. You're an ambassador of the King, which is a weighty and significant position, and you carry yourself differently in that context than you would if you were a salesperson. Let me give you an example from my life of how this has fleshed out in a very real conversation with somebody who is close to me, okay? So a while back in our life, we had a friend. I won't use his name. I'll call him Jake. It's not Jake, but I'll call him Jake. And Jake was an atheist, open about it. Like, I'm an atheist. He wasn't a rude atheist, but he was an atheist, and he was clear about that. And Jake and I became good friends. And maybe more than anybody else in that season of our lives, Jake was just in our house like a lot, like more than maybe anybody else is what I'm trying to say. And he would come over and he would play games and he would eat dinner, and I went to his kid's baseball game. Like, we were friends, right? And one time, Jake initiated a conversation with me about faith. And he says, I want to hear, like, I have some questions. I want to talk with you about what you think. And we had this relational credibility, and there were times we would have maybe small conversations about faith, but we'd never like sat down and had a major conversation about faith. And one night it happened. We agreed. We had even said, all right, man, want to do this? Yeah. So we went out, we grabbed a beverage together, and this is how I began the conversation. I said, Jake, I want you to know, man, like, you're my friend. And because you're my friend, like, I feel a responsibility to share this with you because I believe it's true. But I also want you to know that if you think this Jesus stuff is utter nonsense and you don't agree with anything I'm about to share with you, I want you to know that you and I, we're still cool. You and I are still friends. Our friendship isn't contingent on your response to this gospel conversation. Do you see the difference? Do you see the difference? And I meant that. Like, we were going to be friends no matter what. And you think about Jesus and how he loved people with no strings attached. Like, Jesus is on the cross, bleeding out, asphyxiating, dying. And he prays, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. So we want to embody this incarnational approach with authenticity and with integrity and genuine love for the people around us, but we do need to be present. So my ask is, as we start this journey together, one person this week that you would be intentional with. The second ask I have for you, and I'm kind of enthusiastic about this is the first time, at least since I've been here, that we as a church family are going to be doing devotions together, reading the same thing on the same day for 21 days. It's called 21 Days of Flesh. It's readings from the book, and there's 3 ways you can get this, all right? The first and best way is for you to take out your smartphone right now. If you have a smartphone, take out your phone right now. Up here on the screen is a QR code. If you know how to do that, you just click on your camera. You might need to zoom in a little bit, and there's going to be something that pops up at the top. You click that. It's going to open up a text message. It's going to say 21 Days of Flesh, and you hit send. So as many of you who know how to do that, do that. If you don't, you can literally text 21-day Devo to that number, all right? Additionally, we're going to have this on our church website. So for those of you who are watching online, we would like you to participate. We're also going to post the QR code in our Facebook thing so you can just participate right alongside with us. If none of that is good enough for you and you're like, I want paper, we got you covered. In the lobby, we have printed out copies of this 21-day devotional that we're going to start doing as a family together. If you still want to do more, you can read the whole book, Flesh. We have some copies for sale in the lobby. You can get it on Amazon. Listen, it's not the Bible. There might be some things in it that you disagree with. You don't need to email the elders. Like, it's fine. It's not the Bible, all right? We can agree to disagree on some stuff. But I do believe that for Edgewater Alliance Church, in this season of our church, it is a helpful resource for us to put flesh on the bones of our missional framework and theology that we have believed for some time. The last thing that I want to say to you this morning, church family, is thank you. I do not think that every church would be ready for this series or this conversation that we're going to be having as a church family, but I think you are. I think you're ready to take the next steps in what it means to truly be the church. I love you. God bless you. Hope to see you next week. Thanks. Thank you for tuning in to this sermon. Hopefully it was a blessing to you and an encouragement. For some time at Edgewater Alliance, we have had the conviction that we are to represent Jesus wherever we live, work, and play. And in this season, we are seeking to put flesh on our missional framework and really answer the question of what does that look like? What does it actually look like to represent Jesus where we live, work, and play? And how do we do that together as a community of faith? Well, it would be our hope that many of you would join us on this journey as we seek to truly go be the church. If you would like more information about Edgewater Alliance, the various ministries we have, or partner with us financially, you can do so at edgewateralliance.org. Blessings.